Hey, good morning, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get started as more people join. Next slide, Teresa. I will pause here so everyone can review TSC's antitrust statement. Next slide, please. I'll pause again so that everyone has time to review TSC's marketing policy attribution rule and professional behavior statements. Great. Next slide, please. Fantastic. So we'll take a moment and we'll introduce all of our webinar team for today. As I'm unmuted, I'll just go ahead and get us started. My name is Louise. I am calling in from sunny and very hot Phoenix, Arizona. I lead thesis support programs at TSC, including our Thesis Live webinar series, the TSC Help Desk, and our Trained Service Provider program. My focus is on how TSC can provide resources and support to suppliers in completing thesis and in using their thesis results to drive value for their organizations. I want to thank Jessie Leonard, who is a part of our webinar team and is providing wonderful support to us and is very much appreciated, even if she won't be speaking today. I'll pass to Teresa to introduce herself, and then Allison and Shawnee are welcome to jump in and introduce themselves as well.
Thank you, Louise. Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Teresa Garcia Moore. I'm Manager of Science and Impact here at the Sustainability Consortium, and we're very excited to introduce our speakers today. Alison Edwards, would you like to introduce yourself? And then Shawnee Marsden.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Allison Edwards. I am the director of the Stewardship Index for specialty crops.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shawnee Marsden. I'm Director of Strategic Innovation here at CropTrack, and also I lead our product development team.
Great, fantastic, thank you. Teresa, will you go to the agenda slide, please? Thank you very much. So just to get us oriented around today, I'll get us started. I'll kind of set the context. What is THESIS? Teresa will discuss THESIS KPIs for fruit, nuts, and vegetables. We'll pass to Allison, who will discuss the SISC Stewardship Calculator, and Shawnee will provide an overview of the CropTrack platform. We'll end with time for a Q&A. You're welcome to share questions in the chat as we go, and we'll respond as much as possible, but we will hold responding questions kind of verbally until our Q&A session at the end. And then I'll close this out with a focus on what to do next. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background information. TSC, the Sustainability Consortium, is a university-based organization with a mission focused on consumer product sustainability. THESIS, the Sustainability Insight System, was developed by TSC and is a performance assessment system made up of sets of KPIs, key performance indicators, that benchmark, quantify, and provide insights for year-over-year improvement on the most crucial sustainability issues in product supply chains. THESIS's value for suppliers is in addressing survey fatigue by allowing suppliers to communicate directly with multiple retail buyers on a single platform, creating a way for suppliers to benchmark against each other, and improving insights into how to make improvements year over year. Next slide, please. To support supplier success during your thesis process, we have some best practices we always recommend that we'd like to highlight. Start where you are. So thesis is a process. It gives you visibility and an understanding into where you are now as a way to benchmark and get you started. Thesis provides insights into how to improve year over year, and it is important to respond even when it's difficult and even if your data is incomplete. Understanding thesis scope means that you'll be able to collect the data that you need, and that you'll be able to respond, and that you'll receive better quality insights from your thesis assessments. So ensure that you're collecting data for your global supply meaning all regions and all of your retailer buyers. Begin as soon as possible. The amount of time it takes is difficult to predict and will depend on your internal data environments. A general rule of thumb is that it always takes longer than expected. So to ensure you have enough time, begin planning your thesis assessment process as soon as possible. As you get started with thesis, begin by reviewing all KPIs, and I'd recommend familiarizing yourself with the KPI guidance that's available. There's a lot of important information in there. And then last but not least is leverage your resources. We at THESIS have many resources available to support you. Let's talk about those now. So Teresa, will you go to the next slide, please? Fantastic. So as I said, I'm lead our thesis support programs. And after thesis 2023, my team surveyed thesis suppliers to learn and better understand kind of what current pain point are and what current priorities are. What we learned has directly informed the work that we've done for this year. And I've highlighted a few thesis support resources here, but we at THESIS have many resources available to support you. We'll be launching our thesis support center in August for thesis 2023 as a centralized place to find resources and support, including some new resources that we have developed and that I'm really excited about. Our thesis live calendar was directly informed from our work this year and includes 18 opportunities to have your questions answered live. I also lead our trained service provider program. Trained service providers are independent sustainability expert consultants that can provide hands-on support tailored to your needs. And as always, remember that our TSC help desk is available to answer your questions. And then I have some links that I will add to the chat. Teresa, will you go to the next slide, please? So we're very excited for thesis campaign 2023. We have 10 retailers on thesis this year. Thesis opens in August. So again, to that best practice of getting started as soon as possible, we really do recommend that you go in and review KPIs, add your assessments, etc. On thesis when it opens. You'll begin hearing from your retail buyers in September, going up until November, and then you have until December 5th to submit your assessments. Next slide, please. In thesis, we have a couple of retailer assessments that we'd like to highlight as retailer priority assessments, specifically for produce, which is really relevant for this webinar topic today. I want to ensure that you're aware of the importance of, if you're completing produce assessments, to ensure that you're also completing pollinator health assessment. If you're completing animal protein assessments, it's also important to ensure that you complete animal welfare and antibiotic assessments. These are thesis assessments that are used to directly inform retailer goals. Next slide, please. Great, so let's take a moment and we can dive into our topic for the day. For data collection and reporting for fruit, nuts, and vegetables, I want to highlight a key takeaway for thesis is that for thesis, the value that you get out of your thesis license depends on the quality of the data that you use to complete your thesis KPIs. So we'll take time. Teresa will share her expertise on thesis assessments and KPIs, and then we'll pass to Shawnee and Allison, who will walk you through a very valuable tool that you can use to support your data collection and improve the quality of your data. I'll hand it over to Teresa now. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Good morning, everyone. So today we'll be talking about data collection and reporting for fruits, nuts, and vegetable suppliers. And I want to start off with this diagram that is showing the data pathway diagram for a tier 1 produce supplier. So it starts at the farm level with a farm level calculator like the Stewardship Index for specialty crops. And from there, aggregators can use the tool, put grower data sets together for each crop type, and then use the metrics that they get to answer thesis through an API that Alison and Shawnee are going to explain in more detail. And then from there, through thesis, you can send it to your retail customers. So we included here on the screen a few examples of global retailers here that are already using thesis. So we have Walmart, Costco, Kroger, and others. And TSC encourages tier 1 suppliers to measure their sustainability performance in one consistent way, year over year, using the recommended performance metrics. And so we like to highlight that we would like suppliers to communicate their sustainability performance in one consistent way, in one single way. Like my colleague Louise mentioned, the data quality is really key for the benefit that you're gonna get from communicating your sustainability data to your retailers. And so that's important not only for your customers, but also for you. So you can, some of the benefits that you're going to have is that you can benchmark against peers in the industry. You can compare your year-over-year improvements. You can use your sustainability data for marketing purposes. You can improve market access, understand supply chain risks and potential disruptions. And last but not least, you can share your results with different retailers, Walmart, Sam's Club, others. So you, as a packer, shipper, processor, you can complete your thesis assessment once for your global supply, and then you can submit it to as many retailers as you would like. And just to provide a little bit more context, what THESIS does is that it provides a materiality assessment to help you identify and really understand the importance of specific sustainability areas and hotspots to your specific organization, including not only environmental, but also social indicators. And so based on science, we identified what are the most relevant sustainability areas of a product, or what we call hotspots, and that you should be monitoring within a specific product category. So here on the screen, you can see an example from the berries and grapes assessment of what are the main hotspots, looking at the entire supply chain. So from production through manufacturing, packaging, transportation, consumer use, and then disposal. And based on these hotspots, we then develop the key performance indicators, or KPIs, through a multi-stakeholder engagement process. And these KPIs are aligned with the best industry metrics to measure the performance for this specific hotspots. So if we look at one of them in a specific, we have here, for example, energy consumption on farm. That includes fuel combustion and energy use, and fertilizer application. So both are identified as hotspots. And here you can see an explanation of why. And this is a resource that you're going to find within your assessment. So both energy consumption and fertilizer application both generate emissions that contribute to climate change. So they have been identified as a hotspot or an area with a high impact within a product category. And once the hotspot is identified, we then work to determine how to measure it through a key performance indicator that is aligned with the best industry metrics. So in this case, we're measuring it through the greenhouse gas emissions key performance indicator. And I'm going to show it to you in the next slide. What are the metrics? So it measures greenhouse gas emissions intensity in terms of kilograms of CO2 equivalent per metric ton of crop harvested. And I don't want to get into the details, but when you're answering your key performance indicator, there are many features and resources that are available. So you can monitor.
We lost the last maybe 2 or 3 minutes of your speaking.
I apologize for that. So I'm just going to explain this slide quickly before I hand it over to Alison Edwards with the Stewardship Index for specialty crops. So this slide here is showing how we measure the key performance indicator related to greenhouse gas emissions intensity. I know this is a very important KPI, especially considering that many retailers have net zero emissions targets. They have science-based targets to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions within their supply chain. So we ask you to pay special attention to the greenhouse gas emissions intensity KPI. So when you're answering your KPIs, there are many features and resources that are available. So you can monitor your scores on the top right side over here. You can access the guidance. You can scroll through the KPI menu. But the important thing here is that in the guidance section, you can find the tools and certifications that you can use to answer the KPI, depending on your project. So including in the case of produce, one of the tools that you're going to see is the Stewardship Index for specialty crops, or SISC. So TSC is aligned with SISC metrics for some KPIs in the product categories related to fruits, nuts, and vegetables. Because SISC was specifically developed for the specialty crop industry. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alison and Shani. They're going to explain in more detail how you can streamline that process of data collection through an API that we've been working with them to develop. So Alison, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hello, everyone. I think I can't start my own video. I think the host has to start it. So I'll just begin. Okay. So hi. I am going to give you a quick overview on what SISC is. Many of you already know what SISC is, but I'm sure there's a few people who probably could benefit from that. So SISC is, go ahead and go to the next slide, Teresa. SISC is a multi-stakeholder collaborative that is made up of growers, grower groups, buyers, brands, and environmental nonprofits who collaborate to create science-based data-driven metrics to measure sustainability, specifically for the specialty crop industry. Next slide. So what's important about SISC is there's a few things that are really key to our mission. We basically are working to create a single yardstick to measure on-farm sustainability outcomes for fruits, nuts, and vegetables, so that all buyers ask growers to measure their performance in one way, and that reduces reporting redundancy on growers. It makes it easier for growers, and they're already pretty busy. So that's a good thing. And we also are very focused on making our metrics so that they function for growers as internal management tools. So they actually help a grower understand their own performance year over year as they change their management practices. And that's important because what we're interested in seeing is improvements in natural resource management on the ground. We don't want this to just be a big reporting exercise. We want it to actually work for growers too. So that's core to SISC's mission and dear to our heart, and our metrics are created with growers and grower groups. And I will just briefly say, very important thing to distinction to make here is the difference between data and metrics. So data is what goes into metrics, and having that data be consistent and collected consistently with boundaries and timeframes and input into the metric calculator and then getting metric results back year over year is really important for looking if you want to use this as a management tool, for growers or for a packer shipper processor who's working with growers. Having everything be done in a very consistent way is key. And that distinction between data and metrics isn't made enough. And I just think it's really key here. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So here's a list of our current metrics. As you see, I have a yardstick there to indicate the single yardstick approach, which we're advocating. And the metrics that are highlighted in blue are the ones which TSC is currently aligned with. Well, actually, the habitat and biodiversity metric is as well. But we do have additional metrics, and we are also currently working on 2 new metrics. We're working on soil health metrics as well as a tool to measure soil emissions for specialty crops, which will be both crop and location specific with Colorado State. Next slide. And you can find out more about any of those metrics in detail on our website, just so you know. I always say that's the place to start, is to really understand the metrics. So We are, SISC is in a philanthropic partnership with the CropTrack platform, which is a software platform for farmers. And that basically means that CropTrack, which was they were an affiliate member of SISC, a non-voting member of SISC. They basically said that they would build the calculator onto their platform for free, and they're not going to make any money off of this calculator. So that's important to note, because that allows SISC to provide the calculator for free to growers and very inexpensively to aggregators, like tier 1 suppliers, packer shipper processors. You do not need to be a member of SISC to use the calculator if you're an aggregator. So that's one of the key differences, for instance, between SISC and other tools like the Cool Farm tool. We're not making you be a member to use it. We're trying to facilitate ease of use of this thing and make it very inexpensive. So we do charge a little money for aggregators. That's because we have to pay for the server, and we're trying to just maintain the organization, but we're trying to keep it very inexpensive. So Shawnee's going to give you a lot of information about the calculator and how it works. Next slide. And here, this is just a similar slide to what Teresa showed you earlier, basically showing you that our metrics, answer these KPIs for THESIS, which then go to these retailers. In addition, this also shows you that our on-farm energy use and GHG emissions metric can be used for both THESIS and for Project Gigaton. So that's kind of key for the Walmart suppliers here. Next slide. And Teresa actually already went through this, so I'm not gonna spend a bunch of time on it. Go ahead and go forward. I was just gonna explain how this connects. So the guidance in THESIS points you to SISC. Keep going, next slide. And just to go into a little more detail about the SISC energy use metric, it's an on-farm energy use metric, which allows a grower to start with their total annual energy use data, which is how growers have this information. They have their annual electrical bills and their diesel bills, and they're able to start from that level, which is key. And then out of that, they're able to get a whole farm energy use results as well as GHG results. And it does take grid mix by location into account. It also takes any energy generated on farm into account. And then it also allows a grower or a packer shipper processor to basically designate that down to a specific crop. So there's lots of flexibility in there in how it's used. Next slide. And key to SISC, again, is just that the metrics allow a grower to measure, to manage, and to do that towards continual improvement. And the tool does too. So the calculator actually allows a grower to keep their metric results year over year in a profile where nobody else can see them unless they're requested and they opt into sharing them. But the grower has their own private profile where they can basically look at trend lines over time by management area, by crop type, and by metric. So the grower themselves can use the calculator as a management tool. And as can packer shipper processors, I really think that this level of on-farm continual improvement measure to manage approach is really key to the core of what I think would be a valuable sustainability program for any packer shipper processor. So it's not just a reporting exercise. Next slide. And here's just some examples. Here's a trend line over time of how data looks. Next slide. And here's a good example of how a packer shipper processor would see aggregated data. So say this was just tomatoes and nitrogen use, and it's multiple farms. You can see that the majority of the growers are in clustered together in the norm. There's outliers. This basically shows you that the metric results can provide the packer, shipper, processor, the tier 1 supplier, with information that is valuable in working with your growers to help them improve. You can go interview those outliers and ask them why their N levels are so high, and then help them connect with technical solutions to improve and continue to measure as they implement new management changes. So this is just an example of how using metrics and the calculator can actually work to support your own internal sustainability program as a processor or packer shipper. Next slide. And I'm actually just going to hand it over to Shawnee at this point. You can, because I want to make sure she has more time. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And welcome everybody. In the first part of our, so here in the first part, we're just going to quickly review how aggregators, you may hear us refer to them as tier 1 suppliers like yourself, can log into the tool, send these requests to growers, and then take a look at specific metrics. So here in the first section, you probably heard Allison mention it earlier, but as an aggregator, you do need to have an account and pay an aggregator fee. And then once we get notified by SISC that all that has happened, we'll go ahead and get an account set up for you. So we do encourage you to coordinate with Allison and SISC. And the website for our tool, once you have an account, is here. We also will send out notification to you once your account gets created with a little getting started sort of welcome email and things like that to get you guys up and running. And then once this is done for you, we'll pop over to the next slide. You're probably going to want to get logged into the tool. And that's when you're going to see a page that kind of looks like this. A couple things to point out real quick. We have a couple of tabs. As an aggregator, your data aspect of the tool is very limited. You're just going to be sending requests to growers. The dashboards are really the thing that has the greatest value for you. So we'll cover those in a moment. Upper right is your log out. There's additional information that you're going to see here on the right-hand side of that login page. This will give you access to the data dictionary, to some additional video tutorials that are available for growers, but can also, you guys will be able to see them as well. So you've got to kind of get a feel for what the grower experience is like through those video tutorials, and some additional key information about the SISC organization as well. And then you see this one single button up here that just says send request to growers. So if we simulate clicking that button, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide.
Can I jump in real quick, Shawnee, and just,
absolutely. Yep.
And just say that the data dictionary is key piece of this, because it basically outlines, it's an Excel spreadsheet that you can download that outlines the exact data points you need to complete each metric. And that's key because the growers need to collect that information. Basically, it's annually, in order for you all, and in order for them to complete the metrics, in order for them to send them back to you so that you can aggregate them and send them to THESIS. So this is, it's a process that requires a bit of planning, and the data dictionary is a key piece of that. So I just want to point that out.
Absolutely. And as Asa mentioned, it's an Excel workbook. It's downloadable. And the data in the data dictionary is also accessible to growers as they're completing the tool. So we do kind of keep all that information front and center for everybody as they're working through everything. Yeah. So again, simulate, clicking the button. We'll go ahead to the next slide, which is our data entry panel. And all we have to do here is click to open this. And so this, of course, is highlighted. It's interactive. There's a little message there that tells you what you need to do next. So when we click to open this form, go ahead to the next slide. You're just going to go through and enter the data. So we're going to ask you to identify, give us the name of the organization, the metrics that you want for that organization to complete, and then some information about you. When you complete this form, a process gets started on our end to notify us to go ahead and set up an account for this grower and notify them through an automated message process that this request has been made of them. So all that gets handled for you on the back end without you having to do anything. So from an aggregator's perspective, you guys just let us know who needs to fill out the KPIs, and then we'll go ahead and take care of everything for you. We'll go to the next slide real quick. So once the grower has actually filled in their data and submitted the metric results for you, it's going to be visible in your aggregator dashboards. And there are actually two sets of these dashboards. One set is going to provide you the ability to look at the aggregated metrics for all of your growers. And then the other set, the anonymous set, it's going to allow you to sort of pick one of these growers and look at the metrics for that grower, the metric results, I should say, for that grower compared to other growers that fit the filter criteria that you provided. And that's sort of an anonymous view. So let's go ahead and take a look here at the first set of aggregator dashboards. So we'll pop to the next slide real quick. There is this consolidated metrics view. It's probably one that doesn't get used as often as the others, but you can sort of come into this one board here and see the metric results, aggregated metric results for your growers right here on a single dashboard. But the individual metrics are probably the ones that get used most often. So we'll go ahead to the next slide and take a look at one of those real quick. So the first metric here that we're looking at is actually a two-part metric. So it's got our on-farm energy use and the associated greenhouse gas metric results as well. They each are on their own tab, and there's a couple of other tabs. We'll talk about those in just a second. Those actually allow us to translate the metric results from the SISC calculator into the format that THESIS requires and that Gigaton requires, and we'll show you that in a second. One aspect of the dashboards, and it is consistent for all the dashboards that you have for the metric results, are these totals and yield information that you're going to see across the top, and the filters. And you're going to be able to filter by reporting year, by state, county, and crop. And this will allow you to change what you see in those dashboards based on the filter applied. And a lot of times we're just wanting to see a specific crop result, for instance. So let's go ahead and flip to the next slide real quick. And again, upper right-hand corner are our totals for the metric results, aggregated metric results here in the greenhouse gas energy use. And in this case, we're just looking at strawberries in a single county. And this graphic is split into several parts, and most of our charts are going to be providing a couple of different perspectives for you. The lower right-hand corner shows you suppliers for that given crop and county, and then you actually have renewables versus non-renewables. And in this instance, we're actually going out and pulling some data that's publicly available from information through the power grid. So depending on your location's power grid, we're going to be pulling in data about how much out of the power grid is actually renewable versus non-renewable, and that information gets presented here through this as well. So our demo here is kind of limited in that lower right-hand corner. You're only seeing a couple of points, but of course, as more of your suppliers enter data, you're going to see a lot more points there available to us, and that actually shows us the over time changes that have occurred in your supplier network. So it can help us recognize what the positive impacts of those changes over time can be. And as we mentioned earlier, some of these translated results are available for us. So in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that we're actually presenting CO2 per harvested ton here as the metric result. That's not necessarily the way that THESIS or Gigaton will want to see that. So we actually translate that for you. So if we hop to the next slide real quick. This is actually the GHG emissions that you were just looking at, translated specifically for THESIS. And this translation is needed because THESIS wants it in kilograms per metric ton. And our results are actually calculated in the tool as pounds of CO2e per harvested ton. And Gigaton actually wants to see it in a slightly different format. So the next slide shows you the same thing translated for Gigaton. And with both of these translations, we provide you the ability, again, to filter the results. So you can get the translated results exactly for what you need to do your inputs for and export it as a PDF. You can, of course, copy paste directly from our tool and get the results, the metric results here translated into the format you need and just copy and paste it directly into the tool that you're doing your data entry for. And hopefully that helps everybody along in the process. And the next slide will drop us into another of the metrics that's actually shared, agreed upon between THESIS and SISC. This is our applied water metric. And in this instance, we're actually looking just at lettuce in Monterey County. Same as with the other dashboards, that upper right-hand corner are the aggregated metric results. And then the lower charts show you the results based on specific organizations and your year-over-year metric results. And again, as you're filtering across the top, the results will update automatically in the aggregated results as well as in the underlying charts that are on the bottom section. And just as with the Energy GHG, we're providing for you the ability to translate this into the format that THESIS requires. So you can click the button there at the top and it will translate it into cubic meters per metric ton for you. Our next slide shows you that THESIS pop-up window where those translated tables can get downloaded just like with the other dashboards, or again, just copy and paste as you need them. We'll hop into the next slide real quick. So when it comes to fertilizers, SISC has the metrics, of course, for both nitrogen and phosphorus. This dashboard we're looking at here has filters applied just to show us the nitrogen use metric for tomatoes, which is another SISC metric that has a THESIS counterpart. Again, we've provided the button there at the top so you can translate this and get it formatted for input into the THESIS tool. When it comes to the demo dashboards that we're showing two tomato crops here, so we have fresh and processing across two different counties, I believe. And so again, as more suppliers are added, you'll start to see more of your aggregated metric results and very quickly see those outliers and other points of interest that you might want to investigate to understand a little bit more about what the variances are that have contributed to the range of results that you're getting from your suppliers. The next slide. So again, when you click on that translated button, here is the translated results, your PDF export option, and the filters, just like you had in the other charts. And as we talked about earlier, another important functionality available for aggregators is to compare specific organizations against their anonymized peers. Again, we can filter by crop region and things like that. So let's pop into one of the anonymous dashboards here. So that's our next slide. So our anonymous dashboards look a little bit different than the aggregated metric results dashboards. This is an example where we've selected a specific grower, and you'll see them in yellow identified in the chart here, and we're comparing that grower with other growers using the same crop in a comparable region. So I believe we're just looking at the same county here. Now this can get downloaded as a PDF or an image or even just a PowerPoint slide. You could drop some notes in here and then send that information off to a grower to hopefully facilitate an communication strategy between you and your supplier network to encourage the measure to manage approach for continual improvement. And we have anonymous dashboards for every metric. So we'll hop over to the next slide here, and you'll see it represented here as energy again. So anonymous dashboards for each metric. This here, we're just looking at strawberries. And if we add additional crops, then we actually could compare multiple crops across different regions year over year or in a single year. And again, the organization selected will show in yellow. All the anonymous data is going to show up as blue points. And of course, the more data we get in, the more points that we'll see in our dashboards. Next slide. Now in this one, we actually have an example of anonymous dashboard for nitrogen. And in this one, we've actually updated the lower chart to demonstrate an additional perspective. So how these dashboards can be constructed. You heard Allison mention earlier, we have a philanthropic relationship with SISC, and our goal is to facilitate the adoption of this tool. And get it into, the hands of aggregators like yourselves. And in order to do that, some of the feedback that we get from both growers and aggregators helps us to develop this tool. We're planning some enhancements to it this year as well, based on some of the feedback that we've already had. So we do want to make sure that that everybody knows that we are continuing to improve this tool. And as new metrics get added, we'll continue to adapt the tool to support the additional metrics that have come in as well. Next slide. So as you heard us mention earlier, in order to help your team prepare for entering data into the tool, we have a data dictionary. And this data dictionary identifies all the attribution that's needed for each of the metrics. It's downloadable as an Excel workbook. It has multiple worksheets, so you're not going to scroll through one sheet to see everything. We actually have broken the workbook into multiple sheets where each sheet represents one metric. Growers can download this file. You guys, as aggregators, will have access to this as well. And I encourage you guys to take a look at what is required for each of these metrics so that you understand what it is that we're going to be asking growers to do when they actually start entering the data into the tool. The next slide actually shows you, if you want to go to the next slide, what the data dictionary looks like. And as you can see across the bottom, each metric is on its own. So we let you know what attribute is required and what units are expected and things like that. So hopefully that helps everyone answer the question of what am I going to need to have in order to input data into the tool. So as a grower, it's a little bit different. As you heard Allison mention before, the tool is free for growers. They simply need to request an account. So even if a tier 1 supplier has not asked a grower to do this, a grower can still go in and do this. Once we have the request in, we go ahead and set their account up. They get their password, and it's designed so that it's web-based, right? So a grower can sit down and do this from any device that they have, as long as they've got internet connectivity. So we're trying to make it accessible and easy for them. Next slide. And you've heard us talk about this a couple of times, but we often get asked about that. What data am I going to need? So again, the data dictionary is available for the grower. We also get asked a lot, how long is it going to take me to do this? Now, that really depends on which metrics are being completed, how your data has been prepared in order to get the data into the tool, how many management areas are being reported on and things like that. So it's difficult for us to answer that question. It could take you, 15 or 20 minutes, or it may take you a couple of hours, but the tool is designed to let the growers start entering data, save their work as they go, come back to the tool over time and make sure that they've got all the time they need to input the data. So it can be done throughout their season. And then when they're ready for you to see the metric results, they're going to share that with you so you can see that. Next slide. So again, kind of to help the grower get through the process, we have embedded and make accessible in multiple places throughout the tool overview videos, SISC documentation on the metrics themselves, and tutorials on how to input data into the tool. A lot of this is even downloadable as PDFs, so the grower can actually have it there accessible with them while they're going through and inputting the data in the tool. Some of the form items, we have embedded additional tool information there as well, and instructions, so they can just click on things that will expand out and they can read more about how to fill in that specific one. And of course, if anyone has questions, there is a support email that comes directly to us here at CropTrack and to Allison as well. Next slide. So once the metrics have been determined, then what ends up happening is a binder, we'll call it a binder, gets created for the grower to go ahead and start putting in their metrics data. Each reporting year has its own binder, so multiple years can be done. And then again, we can monitor that change and the impact of change over time through the tool. Forms for the grower are preloaded. So once the task is set up for them, they click a button just like the aggregator does. They click to open a form, and everything they're going to need based on the metrics that they've selected, it's in there, it's available to them, and they can just start filling out the data. Wherever possible, the tool will pre-populate information, especially when we're doing year over year. So growers don't have to keep entering some of that same data all the time, because we know We know their name, we know their name of their company. We may even know when the last harvest was completed. So we'll pre-populate information like that for you wherever possible, and enable the growers to update and edit that as they need to over time. Next slide. So once a grower has completed inputting their data, they do have to explicitly share it. Odds are a grower's probably going to be getting asked by multiple suppliers to report on different metrics. So we give them complete control over who to share their data with, or not their data, excuse me, but their metric results. Again, data is not shared, only the metric results are shared with you. So they're going to tell us who to share the metric results with, and which metric results, and for which years, and for which crops, and for which management areas. So they get complete control over what gets shared with their suppliers. And to show you a little bit about what their world looks like, the next slide opens up, or will show to you, I should say, the grower view of the applied water metrics. So you'll see here, this looks very, very different from a grower perspective, and that's because they have dashboards that represent their data entered in at a management area level. So aggregators get aggregated results. They can filter down to the county. The growers actually get to see their data right down to the management area level, and it's aggregated at a management area, right? So their scores are representative of their management areas. The next slide shows another view of a grower comparing within their own organization, right? So again, just as with the aggregator dashboard, growers have filters that will enable them to filter by crop and by year in different management areas. So here we've actually filtered down to just tomatoes, but for all the management areas and all the years. So we're able to see sort of some comparisons year over year. Next slide, we actually see it filtered down to a single management area. So again, giving that capability for growers to use this as a management tool directly for themselves. And the last slide is just one more chart we'll show you real quick. This is the grower's view of the nitrogen dashboard. Again, we're looking at it over time, but you'll notice that the grower actually can see what specific products were applied during the reporting period. So this level of detail, again, down to the management area, it's only available to a grower. If a grower wanted to share the data, this actual view with you, they could, but it has to be explicitly granted to specific suppliers. So if it's something a grower wanted to share this data with you, then we do give them the ability to go ahead and do that, but it's definitely not provided out of the box. And I think that's it for my slide. So we'll open the floor up for questions.
Louise, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Thank you so much, Shawnee. We'll pause here for anyone if they want to submit any questions via Q&A or chat for a moment.
In the meantime, Shawnee, could you go into a bit of detail regarding data privacy and who owns the data or the metrics that the farmers, that the growers are inputting into the platform?
Absolutely. It's a good question, right? So all the data entered by growers, that grower data belongs to growers. All right. CropTrack does not use that data. Anonymous data, aggregated results are anonymized in the SISC tool for SISC's use. Growers are given the option to opt out of that if they so choose, but by default, the data is anonymized only for the purposes of the SISC and their use of the tool for research and things like that. Probably Allison could probably explain a little bit more about how they use anonymous data, but outside of that, the data for sure belongs to growers. And from a grower perspective, the data can get exported as well. So if growers want to export that data and do their own analysis with it, they certainly could do that.
And I could just quickly say that in terms of anonymized metric results, of course, growers can opt out of sharing that with SISC, like Shawnee mentioned. If they don't opt out, and the purpose of that for SISC is to, over time, gain more information to support benchmarking by crop and location in an anonymized form. So in theory, the idea would be that like we'd have a lot of information about nitrogen use in Monterey County, and then over time growers could compare themselves to that historical data, or sorry, metric results. See, even I do it. Gotta stay vigilant about the difference between metrics and data.
Thank you, Alison. I think that's a great point, and thank you for making that differentiation. Can you provide an example? And I know we have a question in the chat. So should we go to the question
Yes,
first?
go ahead. To the question, I mean.
So actually, I can answer the question if you want, Louise.
Yeah, would you read it out loud, please?
Absolutely. So the question is, can the crop track tool send data directly to THESIS or supplier shipped? And the current answer is no. We have worked with the THESIS API, and we currently have not configured it to automatically do that. There were some additional challenges for us. It's something that we may opt to do in the future, but currently it's just a translation of those results and a quick copy paste. There is a second question again about tool, and it's concerning the geographic limitations of crop track. So there are, all the metrics in SISC are actually supported internationally. There are some specific publicly available data points where we're grabbing some information to pre-populate some data. However, when it comes to international, we give we give you the option of entering that data manually if we do not have the ability to access publicly available international data to pre-populate that. So from a tool perspective, CropTrack is global. From the metrics perspective, the metrics are also global. From a publicly available data perspective, there are some limitations on what data is publicly available to us, but the tool does support entering data manually for those situations where we don't have it available.
Right. A good example of that is in the energy use, on-farm energy use and GHG metric. We have an automatic lookup for grid mix by location for growers, so they can see what their grid mix is for their energy use. I mean, for their electrical use. But we only have that information for the US. So, but you could, as a grower, they could override that and find that information somewhere else and input it manually into the results.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So we only have 5 minutes left, and so I'm going to close this out. Tracy, we go to the next slide, please. So again, just to close this out with the focus on what to do next. So we have kind of 2 quick action items you can do now that we'd recommend. One is to sign up for our THESIS email updates. I'll put a link in the chat. That way you can kind of stay up to date, be aware of upcoming THESIS lives. And so that's the next action item, is what to do next is joining our remainder of THESIS lives for this year. I'll post a link so you register for the chat in the chat. And the idea is that THESIS lives are informed by our kind of conversations with suppliers, and they're focused on resources and information that are directly intended to support your THESIS process. The recording will be shared. Yes, this webinar has been recorded and the recording will be shared. So I want to thank everyone so much for joining today. I hope you have a great rest of your